Welcome to Subnetting Level 12, ANDing. Being able to look at a host IP address and identify the network in which it belongs is an important troubleshooting skill. In a previous video, we learned to locate the subnet, also called the resident subnet, using the subnetting cheat sheet and the subnetting wheel as our guides. In this video, we will learn to locate the subnet by using the process called ANDing. The AND operation is what network devices use to mathematically determine the network address. By ANDing the IP address with its subnet mask, a router can determine which part of the IP address is the network portion. Now, this is important because a router is going to receive a packet. It's going to look at the destination IP for that packet, and then it's going to do the ANDing process to determine the network IP so the router knows where to forward that packet to its destination. So it needs to identify what network does this IP address belong. So basically, the ANDing logic is really what routers do to process packets and to direct packets. Now, the only thing you really need to remember about the ANDing logic is that it's comparing two bits, a 1-bit and a 1-bit, a 1-bit and a 0-bit, two 0 bits. So it's basically just taking two bits and comparing them. This is the result. If you compare a 1 and a 1, the result is a 1. That's the only time you will have a result of a 1 if both bits are 1s. Any other combinations result in a 0. Now let's exactly see how this works. So here's our first problem. Given the host IP 172.16.30.45/24, what is the network address? So some of you may already have an idea what resident subnet is because you already know that a /24 is a 1 pi, basically. It's a class C. It's a /24, which means if we visualize it, we see it as 1 pi or one subnetting wheel. And basically, the subnetting wheel always starts with .0. So we might have a pretty good idea what the network or the network IP or the very first IP is. But let's see how we find this answer mathematically. So there are 5 steps. They're written down here. So the first step, step 1, is to write down the IP address. So we've been given this IP address, and we simply just write it down. So there's our first step. So step 2 is going to be taking the IP address and converting it to its decimal equivalent. So we have 172, we've got 16, we've got 30, and we've got 45. All right, so now we've done that. That's our IP address that's been converted to its binary equivalent. Step 3, write the binary subnet mask. So we have a /24. We know if we looked at our cheat sheet that that's going to be 255.255.255.0. We also know that a /24 is just writing it as 24 ones. So there's our binary equivalent to that subnet mask. And now we're ready to do the ANDing process. So the ANDing process looks like this. We're basically, as the numbers are stacked on top of each other, we're going to start with a 0, right? I'm sorry. We're going to start with the very first digit. The digit is a 1. We go look at the digit below it. That's also a 1. So then that is a result of a 1 here. So you go back and you're just looking at each of these bits as they compare the bits. If the bits line up, there's a 1 and a 1, then basically that 1 falls through and it still remains a 1. So that's the ANDing process. You compare them all. Where you have 2 1s, it results in a 1. Any other combination, it results in a 0. Now, this is the binary equivalent of the resident subnet. So all we need to do is to convert it back to the decimal. So if we look at this, we would just convert that number back, and now you've got the answer, which is 172.16.30.0. That is the resident subnet of that IP address. Now, if we wanted to, we could visualize it, right? We know that a /24 is a subnetting wheel. It represents 1 wheel or 1 pi, and indeed, there's the .0. So the .0 is the resident subnet. Okay, let's take a look at the next problem. So given the host IP 10.1.1.5/24, what's the network address? Once again, you may already have that figured out, but this is a good time to practice to see if you can do the ANDing process. So step 1, write the IP address. Step 2, you'll convert it, then write the binary equivalent, then perform the AND operation. So I'll actually kind of show the whole process at once here. So there's my process. I've taken the 10.1.1.5, I've converted it to my binary. I wrote the /24 as a binary, and then I did the ANDing process, which gave me 10.1.1.0 as my answer. That's the resident subnet. All right. Problem number 2. Given the host IP 10.1.1.66/26, what's the network address? So once again, if you want to pause the video, you can quickly work this problem out, and then when you resume, you can compare your work to my work. So let's take a look at this. So I have to do all steps again. I convert it to the IP, convert the IP address to the binary. So I've done that. I take the subnet mask. Now remember, this is a subnet mask for a /26. So that's 255.255.255.192. So I convert that to its binary equivalent, and now I can do the ANDing between step 2 and step 3. So I'm going to compare 0 and a 1 gives me a 0. So I'm going all the way through. And when I finish that ANDing process and convert it back, I see that the answer is 10.1.1.64. Now remember, this is a /26. Some of you might be thinking, oh yeah, that /26, that's just taking the subnetting wheel and cutting it in half and cutting it in half again, where you have 4 quadrants. And we are looking for that number, that IP address of .66, which of course is going to fall in the wheel somewhere around here, which means its resident subnet is that 64. Now, if you're comfortable with any process, either using the subnetting wheel and the cheat sheet or using the ANDing process, as long as you can find the resident subnet, I'm happy that you can do either process. All right, let's take a look at our next problem. Problem 3. Given the host IP 10.1.1.202/29, what is the network address? So when we complete this process, this is the result. We write the IP address, convert the IP address to binary, write the subnet mask for a /29, which is 255.255.255.248. Then we do the ANDing process, and we find out that the resident subnet is 10.1.1.200. So as we start using different subnet masks, different CIDR notations, the /29, or getting into even maybe the class B subnets, you might find that doing the ANDing process mathematically is a little bit easier for you. And you may also come up with your other, using your other methods. Like I said, whatever you use and you can consistently find the right answer and you're confident with that, I can support that. All right, let's take a look as we move forward. So problem number 4, given the host IP 10.1.1.202/23. So we're actually going to go into like a class B, and we're like, well, we haven't really talked about a /23. The great thing about ANDing is it doesn't really matter what that CIDR notation is, the process doesn't change. So you write the IP address, right? You're going to convert it to its decimal or its binary equivalent. You'll write the subnet mask. Now remember, the subnet mask for /23, that means there's just 23 ones. And then you'll do the ANDing operations. So 23 ones is 255.255.254.0. Now, a couple of things you're going to notice, maybe some shortcuts. When these are all ones in the first 2 octets, it's basically going to, you don't really need to do the ANDing process when you have 255s, because the ones will line up exactly where these ones are. So I know that if this is a 255 and a 255, that these numbers are going to be the same. They're just going to, you basically just have to copy them down. They're going to fall right through and match. So I know that the first octet is going to be a 10 and a 1. So anytime you see 255, you can just write the number right below it, because with all ones, it's just going to reflect that number above. Now, also, the last octet is all zeros. Anything in combination with a 0 is 0. So I know when I see these are all zeros, this is going to end up in a 0. So really the only portion of this that I need to do the ANDing on is this part. That's the part that I need to watch. and I look here, there are no bits that line up where there's a 1 and a 1. They're always a combination of different ones and zeros. So I have my answer 10.1.0.0. All right, here's some practice. You can go ahead and pause the video. Using ANDing, identify the resident subnet. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reveal the answers, and you can check your work. Like I said, if you chose not to use the ANDing process and used the subnetting wheel or other mathematical kind of connections to find these correct answers, that's okay. The most important thing is that you take an IP address um, from this list and you're able to find its resident subnet, or what is the very, very first IP address in the range to which it belongs. All right, we've done it. We've finished subnetting level 12. Keep believing that you can achieve.